Hi guys, so I haven't made a video in a while and thought I'd come back and do a little demonstration tutorial video for you on some cool project code that I was working on recently. And this is all going to be vanilla code, generic stuff, just for the purposes of a demonstration, though it is from a real project. I'm stripping out everything that's, proprietary, whatever, so no worries about that, but it should be interesting. What I've built is a dynamic form that will specifically expand and contract the amount of controls necessary for whatever situation you happen to find yourself in. This thing can be loaded with any number of controls. You can even set up support for dynamic resizing of the individual panels so that you can have panels with more controls, panels with fewer controls for other situations. It can literally be utilized in whatever situation you find yourself in. Fantastic use case for it would be like if you had like a configuration file of some sort and you wanted to create like a configurator for your application. So you could load the values of this configuration file in and then manipulate those values and save them back out for later reuse, so that your changes could survive a relaunching of the application. So it's quite powerful. I like it. It took a little while to sort of engineer a solution for this that I liked. And this particular solution will be nice because it will use custom form elements and also a custom event handler, so that you can remove form elements directly from the actual element itself. And I'll show you what I mean as we build this thing out. So go ahead and start by creating a new Windows form application. Either by clicking the new project link there or going file new, whatever you wish. You can name this guy whatever you want. I'll just call it custom form, like so. Okay, and go ahead and let that build up. Once we get into the actual form itself, after your application is loaded, just resize this guy to whatever feels appropriate for you. You don't need to rename the form or anything like that. I recommend you do that in production code, but for the purposes of demonstration, it's not really that big of a deal. So we're going to need a few elements here, and these elements are required for now. So you're going to need a standard panel, and you're also going to need a button. And just go ahead and place that button in the bottom. Once you get that accomplished, let's go ahead and change some properties of our panel here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to set the panel's name. We're going to call it panel underscore main. You can call it control, whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. Just make sure that you change your calls to it accordingly. And then we're going to go down and change the anchor. And we're going to set the anchor for our panel to all the way around. And this will just set it up so that the panel will expand with your form as it's resized, even if it's resized by the user. We're also going to set the auto scroll property to true. This will allow the form to have a scroll bar once the elements get bigger than the actual form itself. And then we're going to go down here to border. Actually, we don't need a border for this guy. That's fine. Let's actually go down to... Actually, that might actually do it. Yeah, I think that's got it. Okay, so another thing you can do is grab this guy. Actually, you don't even need to do that. No worries. So, okay, that does it for your form. For your form panel, let's go ahead and adjust the button a little bit here. So we're going to go ahead and set the button to button underscore add, because button is going to be responsible for adding the elements to the form. And you can do this with anything, really. It doesn't need to be a button, but for the sake of demonstration, we'll use a button. And we're going to go ahead and set the text of the button to be add, like so. And that should actually do it for the button. One more thing on the button, actually, before we end off here, just for completeness sake. Let's go ahead and set your anchors to bottom right and remove the top left anchors. So it should say bottom right when you're done. So This guy should be anchored all the way around. This guy should be anchored on the bottom right. What this will do is this. It will allow your button to remain fixed at the bottom right and your panel to remain fixed in the middle. And it will resize dynamically with the form. And that is exactly the behavior that we are looking for. Go ahead and make mine just a little bit bigger. Okay, so now that we're done with that, we can go ahead and create a custom control. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a user control, and we're just going to call it content. I think that's what we'll go with here. Content. And it's a class, so make sure you capitalize your first letter there. Not 100% necessary, but I would consider it good form. Okay, so if everything has gone accordingly, you should have this little box that you can now manipulate. Let's go ahead and resize it a little bit and add some custom forms to it. So we'll stick a checkbox on there, and these really don't matter. The only thing that's going to matter is that at the end you're going to want one button, and for you know, just for the sake of being you know, consistent, we're going to go ahead and put it in the bottom right hand corner. But we'll just drag a few other boxes out here and just some other elements, just to, you know, make sure that you guys can sort of see my point as to why this is kind of neat. So we'll get some check boxes and maybe a radio button, just some random elements. It doesn't really need to be anything special. So okay, at this point let's go ahead, and the only thing we really need to do with this code, or with this particular form, is rename this button to remove, button underscore remove. We're going to want to set its anchors, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll change them again from the top left to the bottom right, and that will just allow the button to remain fixed in the bottom right corner. So if you did it right, you should be able to resize the form and the button should move around with it. Let's go ahead and make the form, I guess about like that's fine. It doesn't really matter as long as the elements all fit within it, and it's best if the form begins smaller than this. It doesn't necessarily need to stay that way though, depending on how you set up your anchors and how you design it and everything. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do with our button is make sure that we set our text so that it doesn't irritate me later when I see it and it's not labeled properly. So let's go ahead and call it remove for our text. Okay, so that will be our remove button. And again, this doesn't necessarily need to be a button, but that's just the way I'm going to demonstrate it so that it's, I guess, easy. Okay, so let's go ahead and create our custom form. We're going to give it some add code now. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to define a constant, and we're going to call it const int, int, and then we're going to call it a spacer, like that, which actually, I believe it's, you want to do a constant in all caps like so. Normally, I think that's what most people do. And we're just going to set that to 3. And what we're going to use that for is it's going to be a spacer that will give you some padding in between each form element. Another thing, speaking of form elements, go ahead and, you don't have to do this, but I like to, just so that you can see the difference between each form element, or between each panel anyway. Go ahead and come down here to border as your property and go to fixed single. And that should give you a border around each element, so you'll be able to see them and you'll see how they behave, kind of. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to get our panel. So let's go ahead and instantiate an object. We'll call it, or we'll actually use content, I believe is our class that we named it. And we'll call it content with a little c for the actual variable name. And we'll go ahead and instantiate an object of it, just like so. And we'll go ahead and prepare another content panel. Content, let's capitalize that. Content, and we'll call it previous. and we'll actually leave that one uninstantiated for the time being. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do content.add, panel main dot add controls like that, and then dot add. Sorry about that. Okay, so and here we're going to add our content. And that's going to be responsible for actually adding our content panel that we have instantiated up there to our list of available panels and controls within the panel main panel that we created on our form. Okay, so now what we want to do is get the number. We want to test to see how many panels we have available to us, because the first panel is going to be different than every other panel that we instantiate. So the first panel will detect if we're creating the first panel or not by doing a simple if statement, and the if statement will be panel underscore main dot controls dot count, like so. And we're just going to say if that's less than 2, then we know we're creating the first panel. Why 2? Well, simply put, the panel list of controls, the count, will actually be 1 higher normally than the index value of the individual controls. So the count will start at 1 essentially. So 1 will be the first panel, and we want to see if we're building that panel. So if the count is currently less than 2, then it's probably 1. Why do I do less than 2 instead of equal to 1 or less than or equal? Well, 1, I don't like writing less than or equal unless I absolutely have to. I prefer to just do a less than sign. It's fine. And then also, that's just a stylistic choice. And then also, I like to account for erroneous conditions, even if it's impossible to reach within the code. So even if I know there's almost no chance that that thing is going to be less than 0 or whatever, or anything other than 1, I wanted to treat panel numbers of less than 1 the same as they would 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and put our brackets on here because, well, I got a feeling we're going to need more code than just one-liners. So let's go ahead and add some additional properties in here, such as the location. So what we're going to do that, because we instantiated our object up here, instead of just doing it in here generically, we can do this cool little trick, content.location, and access it very directly, instead of having to call it in more roundabout ways. And I like that significantly better. So content.location, we'll just set it equal to a new point value, which is just a standard object. So let's do 0, 0 because we want it to be in the upper left-hand corner of our panel main panel. Now the way form elements work is well, locationing anyway, is the coordinate plane is relative to your form element. So if I do 0, 0, it's actually going to appear right up here in this upper left-hand corner of the panel and not of the form itself. So 0, 0 for the panel would be up here, which it does respect it. So if it's a child element, then it will appear that 0, 0, the origin point, will always be the origin point of the actual object, or the actual parent object. So just keep that in mind when you're designing UI, that is how it kind of behaves. Okay, so we've set the location, and for now we'll leave it at that, and we'll go ahead and start our else clause, which is going to be every other condition possible. And we're going to go ahead and just do content.location, and we're going to set that equal to a new point, and that new point is going to have a value of 0 for its x value, because we don't care how about the x location coordinate value. We want them all to be left aligned, and we want them to stack vertically. We don't want to do tiling horizontally or anything like that. You could set that up if you want, if you can figure out the math on that yourself. Good deal. This particular code's not going to go quite that deep down the rabbit hole. That would put me here for a lot longer than I'd want to be. So in order to get our y value, we're going to do some interesting math here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the location of the previous panel in our list. So we're going to do previous, and we're going to do dot location and then dot y for our y value, and that will just return the y value of its coordinate point. And we're going to add that to the previous dot height, and then we're going to again add the spacer value. Okay, and that will give us our desired positioning for this guy. And hopefully, why do we show? Oh, so we're unassigned. Okay, so yeah, we need to actually get the previous value. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to do previous equals panel main dot controls to get the control list, and then dot, actually, no, not dot, we're going to do brackets because we now want to issue an index, and we get the index value by doing panel main dot controls dot count -2. Again, why -2? Well, like I said, the indexing is already off by 1. The index value is always 1 less because it starts at 0, whereas the count always starts 1 higher at 1. So we've already got that discrepancy, so that's 1 value. And we want to get the previous panel, not the panel that we're on, so we want to subtract an additional 1 from it. So that's why we're doing a -2 there. Now, we're always going to add these panels to the end of the list. This particular setup isn't going to support adding them in the middle. You'll be able to remove from whatever position you want, but the add button is always going to append to the end of the list. There will be some additional steps if you want to try and figure out how to make the add button work anywhere you want. That would just be a little bit more tricky. Basically, you'd want to put the add button like in each form control. So if you were going to do that, you'd put it like in here, and then you'd pass the index value of that particular object up to the through the event handler when you click on that button, and then that would give you your index, and then from there you just do some math to figure out which index you wanted and that sort of thing. So you can see currently that we've still got a red line under this guy, and there's a reason for that, obviously, and it is because when you get the control value like this, it's getting it in a generic way. So what we need to do is we just need to cast it to what we want. So we're just going to cast it to content, like so. And that will get rid of our error. And now we should be able to see that we can get our panel, our previous panel, without having any problems now. So the next thing we're going to want to do, because it's not going to look right yet, is we're going to want to set some other values here, and these are going to be good for any particular panel, whether it's the first or the last, it doesn't matter. So we're going to go ahead and set these outside of our if statement here. So we're going to do first the anchor. Well, actually, we can do the width first. So content dot width will equal panel main dot width, and that will give us our content will now span the panel main. All right, and the next thing we're going to want to do is content dot anchor equals, and as a trick you can actually come over here and do your form designer and just view code and then expand that code, and in here you can actually see exactly how the anchoring is done. If you want, you can even just copy this directly and then edit it the way you want, which is just a little shortcut to being able to get this done quickly without having to, you know, sit there and go, well, I need this and this and this, etc., etc. So what we want is we want to do every single one of these, but instead we want to remove the bottom. We don't need the bottom at all. So we'll go ahead and pull the bottom, and in fact we can actually just do this, because honestly we don't need all these extra parentheses and such. Except I do want to actually enter these down right there. And how many parentheses do we actually need? We have 1, 2, 3 at the end. We actually don't need near that many. We only have 1 here, so we need 1 at the end. 1 there and 1 there, so we got that. So this guy, I think we can actually get rid of quite a few of these. That should actually be correct. Okay, so now we have our panel, our anchor, everything should be set. And in fact, I'll bet this code right here will even run. Let's see what we've got so far. Let's see if we come up with anything here. So yeah, as you can see, the form dynamically resizes. You already can add as many button controls as you want, and we can resize this form, and you can see that the elements will resize dynamically with the form just as we have planned. We also have the spacing in there, the 3 pixel spacing that you can see there. And this is all completely dynamic. You can add as many of these as you want. So that is that. How cool is that, right? And of course, in order to, just to show you exactly why you would do this, let's say, hey, my boss just came in and gave me more requirements. I need to add some controls. You can just drag this thing down, add a couple of controls, whatever you want. And now when you hop back into your form and start adding controls, you can see that the code has dynamically allocated that space. And your code is dynamic enough that it can handle those new elements no matter how many there are. So that's actually pretty good. Okay, so the next bit, I'm going to show you how to dynamically remove these form elements, and that's also very interesting. So let's go ahead and get started on that after we resize all this stuff. Okay, so this next bit will be a bit more tricky. What we're going to do is we're going to go into our content, and now we're going to start doing some more fun stuff. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create a custom event handler, and what this is going to do is it's going to fire when we click our button. So we're going to basically chain react our events in order to create an event that's detectable by our original form class. So let's go ahead and create another class in here at the bottom to hold our event. So we're just gonna call it public class. We'll call it content args, and we're just going to have it inherit from event args, like so. Go ahead and put our braces in for that, and we're going to create a public integer. We'll call it index, and we'll go ahead and create a public function. And we'll go public void. To be a constructor. Actually, no, it can't be a void. It's got to be a constructor. So we're just going to name it content args, just like before. And we'll have it have an integer value here as an argument. And then here we'll do index equals value. And we'll just close that off. And that should do it for our arguments. So basically what this is going to do is it's going to hold the index of each individual element. So now what we're going to do is create a global variable up here called public integer index. And we're actually going to go ahead and instantiate that to 0. Or initialize it anyway to 0. Okay, so we also need to declare a couple more functions up here. We need a public, I think it's public delegate void remove site event handler. And we're just gonna pass it an object of sender and we're going to pass it our custom event args, which would be content args and E, just like so. And then we're also going to want to create the actual event. So we'll do public event, and we'll make it of type remove site event handler, and we'll just call it remove site. In fact, we can stick an on in there to make it more like the other ones. On remove site, just like so. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to go into our content designer here and just double click our button, and that'll create our button click event. And here we'll just do on remove site, and we'll send this as our sender, which will be our content, our custom form element basically is what we'll be sending it, an instance of that. And then we'll also send, well, not an instance, but a pointer, I believe. But anyway, the point is we'll also be sending it an event, so, or not an event, but some arguments. So we want to initialize the arguments with a keyword new and content args, just like so. In parentheses, we'll put index. Okay, we'll close off our parentheses there. And that is all we need to do to send that event. Now we just need to intercept that event on the other side. So let's go over to our form class, the code behind anyway. And we're going to need to add a few things in here. So the first thing we need to do is we need to add our event subscription. So let's go ahead and do that. And we want to subscribe globally. So we're going to do content.on remove site. We're going to plus equal that. We're going to do new content remove, basically just like you see in the thing that popped up there, dot remove site event handler, just like that. And we're going to have it be remove site underscore click. Now this is going to show erroneous for the time being because we don't have that class or that method written yet, but it will be. So now let's go ahead and write that method out. And actually we want to do one more thing before I forget about it, and that is we're going to want to update the index of this particular instance here. So let's do content.index equals, and we're going to set it to the count. So panel main dot controls dot count. And remember, the count is always greater than the index, so we're going to subtract 1 from that. Okay, that should give us our index value updated, as well as our method handle. Well, our event handler initialized. We're subscribed to it at any rate. So now we can go ahead and create our new method, which will be private void on, or actually not on, but remove site underscore click, like so. And we're going to have this be object sender, and then content args E, just like that. And you'll notice that it matches very closely with the button click add event, its declaration. So we're almost there now. Now we just need to write the code that will handle the removal, which will all go within this little portion here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to first detect our sender, which will be content, like we've been doing. We'll create actually, we don't need to create the cast just yet. So we're just going to go content, content, and then equals, and then we'll cast it, content, just like so, and then sender. And there is a method to that madness, so, you know. All right, so we're also going to do content update list, I guess. Should be fine. And we're not going to bother initializing that one yet. That'll work very similar in nature to this previous here. Okay, so now what we're going to need is a loop. So we're going to do for, and we're going to do int I equals e.index. Okay, and then that will give us a starting point for our for loop. Basically, what that's going to do is it's going to set the integer I equal to the e.index, and e.index will be the index value of that particular panel that you're clicking the remove button from. So that was sent through our arguments. So that's what we've done now. We've basically given us the starting point for our dynamic update to move all the form controls around when we remove a site. So now we're just going to say I is less than panel main dot controls dot count, and we actually don't require a -1 there because we're doing less than, so that accounts for that. So we're just going to do a semicolon now, and then we're going to do I plus plus to iterate through the loop, or to increment as we iterate anyway. So in our for loop, the first thing we need to do is we need to set the content, we need to set the update list's location. So what we're going to do is update, or actually we need to determine what the update list is what we really need to do. So the update list is going to be panel main dot controls, and then the index will be I. And that's exactly how we're going to handle that. Next we need to set its location, update list dot location, and it literally is just this easy. Set it equal to a new point. Now this is where it gets interesting. We don't want to set it to the content location, because then we'll get a form folding problem where we'll have all the elements will fold up into one spot because they'll all be set to the same location. We want them to figure out what location they need to be at. And the easiest way to do that is to do the reverse of how we created it. So basically, you're just going to take this and do the inverse of it. So in this case, update list dot location dot y, which actually, if you're paying attention, you can see I've messed up, 0, there. All right, and then instead of adding, since we're doing the inverse, we're going to subtract. So then we're going to do update list dot height, and then we're also going to subtract the spacer. And that's it. That's literally as easy as that is. Oh, and I've also messed up here. You can see that this is showing an error. The problem is we need to cast it. Cast that as content, and the error should deplete or go away. So, and now there's one other thing we need to do. We need to update list and set the index value. And that is the method to the madness. And we're actually going to set that index value to I. And the reason this is why we did this initialization and cast here, because otherwise panel underscore main dot controls index of I does not have access to this index variable, and we need that here. We need to be able to set that. So the best way to do it is to instantiate a new object of update list and set it equal to that panel cast as content, and that'll give it access to that index variable. You set it to I because basically what you want to do is you want to get the panel that you're removing, and you want to update all the panels after it with the new location. But that's only going to get us halfway there. We also need to make sure we update its index value as well. Otherwise, when we click the remove button, the index will be wrong, and it will either remove the wrong button or give us an out of bounds error message. So in order to avoid that, we set the index equal to I, and that takes care of that little problem for us. Now the only thing left to do is to remove the actual form elements. So we just do panel main dot controls, and then we can set that to our index. So that should be e dot index, like so, because we want to remove the current control that we're on. And then we can set that to actually controls dot remove at, like so, and then do e dot index, and this will give us the ability to remove that form control element with no problem. And actually, I believe this code will work. Let's see, I could be incorrect, but I think it will. Look at that. I think we have an error, and our error is we have an index out of range. Yeah, we need to set this to index minus -1. It's pretty obvious there, because we want to make sure that the index is actually being subtracted. So now when we remove panels, we should be able to remove them in any order we want, and add them back, and remove them on the fly any way we want. And now the way this code will work, we can also come back in here to content, and again we can resize this dynamically and add whatever we want. Minus that. We can add whatever we want: text box, links, labels, list box, whatever, you know, whatever we want. And when we run the code and add form elements, you can see that it dynamically accounts for that space. And when we remove them, again, the list will automatically repair itself. So you can remove the list items from the list, and you can see that the gap is seamlessly accounted for, and that there is no issue with it getting getting weird or whatever. So that's it. That's the form control that will dynamically resize and such based on your needs. And you can programmatically add elements to this however you want. You can even nest these. The one I actually built for the project that I'm working on, the content has additional panels nested within it that also are able to be dynamically added and removed from the nested list. So you've actually got panel nesting, and you can do pretty much whatever you want with this thing. It's pretty versatile, I think. I don't know if it's the best code in the world, but it's pretty well written. It only takes 2 classes to accomplish. Well, really 3 if you count the little mini class down here where we hold the arguments. But you don't need to put that in a different form, in my opinion, or not different form, but different a different file, because it's it's something you're not. It's related to this, so it's fine. And yeah, so this is something that you can easily import and export into other projects to reutilize this code. It's pretty well. It's pretty versatile. So that's it. I think that's all I wanted to show you guys for today. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you've learned something. And I will certainly post the source code for this, on demand if you guys want it. Maybe I'll create a paste bin or something for it in a couple of days and put it up there and give you a link to it in the description or something. But for now, enjoy the video, and hopefully you guys can make use of this. Thank you very much. So I thought I'd give you guys a little additional content here, because I saw something in my video, and as I was rewatching it, and I guess this is what I get for doing just one take or whatever, but I obviously missed a little something that those of you with a keen programming eye might have noticed. So this content variable object that we set up here, we never actually used it in this code anywhere. So we didn't call it in, we didn't utilize it, it's kind of there for nothing, and as the code stands, you can technically remove this and it wouldn't hurt anything. It would still compile and work normally. So what is this for and why did I put it there? Well, I put it there out of habit, actually. So the reason it's there, and I'll give you a little demonstration of this. Content is basically this object that we're creating here is basically the sending object that the event was fired from. So in the case of, well, in this case specifically, we fire an event when you click the button to remove the panel, and once that event fires, it sends off a sender, which is itself, and then it also sends the event arguments. Well, the sender comes over as a generic object because you have this object keyword, and you're not passing it as a specific object, you're passing it as a generic one. So if you try to access something within that object and you just used sender, you'd notice that you're not getting anything. So the reason why we set this up is in the event that you want to utilize something, one of your custom classes, or not classes, but custom methods or custom variables or something you've put in this object, which in production code you might. In my case, I did utilize some things from it. So what you need to do is you need to create this object and then cast your sender to that object type. Now you can't just do a cast. So if I do like this, and then try, you'll notice I still get this. So it's not going to work like that just inline. You're going to have to actually create a new variable of type content or whatever type that you're utilizing for your situation and cast it to that type. So once I do content and then dot, you'll see the difference. Now all of a sudden I've got, height, width, background color, anchors, buttons, bounds, all the events, everything that entails that particular object. So I have a lot more options this way. That's why I did that, even though I didn't actually utilize any of this functionality within this method. If for some reason I needed to get any additional data from this particular sender object before I destroy it, this would be a way to do it. So that's what that's about. That's why it's there, just to eliminate any confusion or any of you guys going, he said this is going to have some manner of, there's a reason why he's putting this here, but then there really wasn't. Well, there is. It just didn't get implemented by the end of the video. So I do apologize for any confusion that may have caused, and I hope that this little section clears it all up. I really thought about re-recording all that was in the video for so long that I didn't want it just randomly appearing and then disappearing and then maybe appearing again somewhere else where I may have forgotten to delete it. So I figured it was a better idea to just leave it in there rather than trying to remake it, because other than that, I really liked how the video came out. I figured it would just be better to just give you this little extra tidbit at the end. So that's the method to the madness. It's the same for this guy here. Basically, you're just casting your content panel into this update list. So it's exactly the same principle. You're just setting it up so you can access its methods and its assets, instead of getting the generic object assets that are returned by these things. Okay, well, thank you again, and hopefully this cleared up any weirdness or misunderstandings or whatever you may have had.